I'll just make really simple. Is that yours, right?
Yeah, these are mine.
Alright, boss.
Anna will share the video.
Of course.
So essentially, like, you're gonna want to draw it out. Obviously, you guys will have like a graphic like that you can work with. For me, I have to draw it out that way you guys can see what I'm doing. But like, just take this line really quick. I'm gonna cut this piece out. What's up? This is Bristol. So it's not
Are they using museum board or Bristol?
They're using museum.
we're just doing this because I didn't want to use a medium.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So like right now, I'm just like, I'm not doing anything. I'm just cutting it out that way I can make this fold and show you guys. But so I have a little piece like this, and instead of like bending it, because that won't give you a perfect 90, you can take it and cut very lightly through it, like you almost like make a score line. Like you won't be able to see it on here, but like there's a little, you can feel it cut. Light can see it, but from there you'd be able to
A
bend.
ton of sticks on here.
Oh, perfect.
And
I don't know, those sticks, lovely. Are those yours?
I have no clue what this is.
this is for a picture. So it's what? Four? Advanced B or A.
So I cut it to where you can see like this will bend itself and it sits, but I didn't cut fully through it. And you're gonna want to like, let's say if you want to make a little space, if you want to elevate something, you would, this would be a really rough doing of it, but.
The museum board is a lot easier to control
Yeah.
those score lines on too.
I didn't do it with Bristol, so I'm like, I'm learning it myself as well. But
If you're heavy-handed, this might be a little bit hard for
it's
you.
a learning curve for you.
But you can do it.
So museum board cuts like butter. It doesn't need as much pressure. It's not cardboard. But again, keep your fingers clean.
Yeah, we had Muhammad cut himself. You remember that? So right now I cut a little flap out of this, and to bend it upwards, you're gonna flip it over. Take basically this. I'm gonna cut like it's like a little rectangle I have cut out. I'm not gonna cut all the way through it like I did these other three sides, but rather I'm gonna do a really light like score line and cut through it. And now like this would fold up. If I had a little piece right here, so like just imagine like a little piece of paper that sits over here, that creates a little space. And you can take, let's see, need a flat stick.
Good. Here's one.
You can take a stick like this, and to make sure it fashions up, you would glue it to this little piece right here, and then it would sit up, and like you would have a little piece that follows through, and you can see the movement and how it holds up. But then with this, you'd be able to create, what should I do here? What do you think? Just drop down?
Yeah. Just do the second one. What's really nice for the Drawdles overall too is if you can make some sticks that find their way going all the way across it, like you see that. Because if it didn't have this, it would feel really flimsy and like it's gonna fall over and fall apart. But these big structural sticks allow it to stay sturdy and.
We'll talk about primary, secondary, and tertiary sticks.
Ooh,
Yeah, you can do that.
Um,
While I'm doing this for them.
So in the same way that during project one for the models, you would have primary, secondary, tertiary spaces, you know, where this is my big, large space that we're going to focus on, we're going to look at. This is the, secondary, and then we'll move on to whatever the, sort of smaller, less defined spaces are. Yeah, here, this will be easy. You can see with something like this that it's got this big primary movement going through it, and these would be primary sticks. Whereas you can see these other ones that are probably secondary. I don't know who made this or what they were considering, but I would assume these were their secondary movements here. And that allowed it to do more, honestly. It just doesn't, it allows you to make your model or your Drawdle more dynamic and reinforces a lot of the structure that's already going on. That's what's happening with these tertiary sticks a lot is what you'll see. They're not necessarily structural. Like you could pull this stick out and the whole thing is probably going to stay the same. It's going to be okay. But it's reinforcing what's already going on here, right? You can see it here to this. These would have stayed without it, but it's reinforcing this sort of space here. Is that good, do you think? Yeah.
So following on, so like what you did, like you see how like I made this little flap, but like right here, I didn't fully cut it, but I cut it enough to where it would bend. And so this bend allows you to have your tertiary sticks would honestly probably be further down here. Your primary sticks are going to be the ones that really show and emphasize your moves through this.
Yeah, just like this one here.
Yeah. So you can see like primary,
Crossing it.
but you have like tertiary elements that are kind of invisible to the eye unless looked at from a certain angle or upside down. And so here, if I were to hypothetically put this under, I would have a tertiary stick if it ran behind and you didn't really see it. Obviously it's not glued right now, so it's a little harder to keep it in space. But this would be a more tertiary stick because looking at it through this slot, you don't see it unless you flip this thing upside down. But if it would almost become secondary if you put it in front to where if you look at it, you can see the stick through this little window that I created. And then up here, it'd be more primary because you have the stick up and elevated over and it basically cuts across your whole paper. Obviously, not all of your sticks will cut across. Some of them will end and they'll make a new movement. They'll create a new space.
It's really ideal too to have your Drawdles read both on the front and the back.
That's
right?
a big thing.
Like it's still interesting here. You can still follow movement and see different spaces that are being created, you know?
Your stick system should not be so simple to where it's just 3 or 4 sticks connected, but you should do a different scale of sticks. Obviously, get no bigger than this is what I would say 3/4 inch, half an inch. This is half an inch, huh?
Yeah, I mean personally I'd say half an inch.
Half an inch
maybe
is the
a little
biggest you
bit
want to go.
bigger.
It's a little big. It depends on your dichotomy, how big your
Mhm.
graphic is. Like if you're doing a half scale graphic, you might be able to reason with it. It's touchy subject, but you can have probably no bigger than half an inch. And then you want to use 1/8 of an inch, I think this is, or like a little smaller.
You'll see that too, though. You'll be able to read that. Like, if you get a stick that's too big and you start putting it in there, you're gonna notice
yeah.
that it's a little bit too large. It's gonna look awkward, you know?
Yeah, so definitely before you cut, because obviously you guys are gonna print these out. I probably went through 3 or 4 iterations of my page before I got something I liked. Obviously, I didn't make the whole thing. I made one cut, didn't like it, and I scrapped it and made a new one. But you're gonna want to do smaller sticks. You're gonna want to do larger sticks like this, 1/2 inch. Sorry, dude.
You're good.
And you're just gonna want to make sure that they connect. You don't want to tack it on like this, but rather you want to cut a notch out of this. You want to notch it in, or you want to notch this, and that way they sit flush. They sit together. It also makes your craft better. You'll have a 90-degree that won't wiggle around like this.
It's nice to see some openings in the Drawdle too.
You
know,
want
where can
you want
see
them to read like a
completely through
6-sided
it,
model, just like you guys did Project 1.
You know.
Because if you look at it, you can see through the whole model the very intricate spaces coming through from this very 1/2 inch space that you have now. And you can see on this backspace, very, very detailed, very informative. Same thing on the front and all other sides. There's a different story to tell on each side.
These cuts are nice too. I don't know whose this is, but
It's Hosmer's.
Oh, is this Hosmer's?
Yeah, it's Hosmer's.
I miss Hosmer. But it's really nice for some of these cuts to be really intricate, you know, rather than just being like no offense to your
I mean, it's just, I don't have anything to
impromptu
work with,
thing. But like it's nice that it comes up and goes, but like you really want to see some of these
Break apart.
these intricate break apart cuts, yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
where it's creating shapes.
A
you
big
know?
thing would be like, obviously with this, I don't have anything drawn, but on your graphic, you can see like this bold space. It's a dark line away. It's a big mass. This is what's going to come out. It wouldn't go back because it's a big statement piece. I guess you can say it's primary. So it's going to become primary, and you're going to use a primary stick to represent that.
Unless that works with your concept, right?
Yeah.
Like unless your
Conceptually
darker
depends on
spaces
it.
are something that you want to push back,
But
then yeah, I would generally say your really strong movements or your really strong
are your dark elements,
your really
primary
dark
elements. It's going to be a darker
Bring
line.
on,
Right? That's
you know.
typically what's going to happen. Obviously, no guarantee to it. I honestly really like this because this piece, rather than becoming just this L, it sits on this stick, this primary stick, but it folds down midway and becomes like almost a secondary thing with a smaller stick reading it.
Yep.
Yeah, so it reads depth and it's not just flat. It has intricate moves within itself.
Are they doing the same that we did, 1/2 inch at the highest thickness? Yeah.
So you guys will be following a 1/2 inch, but it's very simple. Just obviously, you're not going to be using bristle. You'll be using 2-ply museum board, I believe. But you're not going to want to cut all the way through this. Like you see here, I cut through 3 sides, and then I did a very light slit. That way it could fold. That way it wasn't ripping or folding on a really weird angle. So yeah.
Think of it as something new and something fun. I know it's easy to get out of project 1 and take all of that work and just kind of feel like, oh, like I don't want to do anymore, you know, but like think of it as something new, something cool that
fresh.
you can experiment with and have fun with, you know.
Is there anything else you want me to talk about? Chatty?
That is right up there.
I was like, but do you think I missed anything? Oh yeah, I covered it.
I wasn't here for all of it. Did you? We talked about.
Well,
the
I'm just talking about for
models.
this area, like the
Oh.
cutting, the drawdles.
No, yeah. If your museum board, if you're cutting it right, and like let's say you
That's what I'm gonna
did a
talk
whole
about.
bunch and you
Ironing.
already got to all the way like to here, and it falls off, like you can glue it back on, but definitely try to be careful and leave those score cuts so that you can bend it rather
It's just
than
a very
cutting
light
it and
score line
tapping
with your
it
knife.
back. Because it is pretty easy to see any sort of glue on this museum board and stuff.
Before we go to this combination of the ribs and the museum board, we may actually do a system of sticks first, just so that you understand
I wish.
how things could come together. And looking at the three systems, okay?
That would actually be really good for them, I think, because it was hard. I feel like that was hard for us because we threw it all into one thing within 5 days. So I feel like that'd be better for them if they did a rib and then translated it in.
So then again, this is of your main graphic, and then 3 are resumed into 3 locations. One represents the profane, one is the sacred, the other one is the in-between, how they transition between the two. Okay, and so we took an area and we blew it up 2 times. And again, because this is limited with the information, when you go jump in scale, obviously you have to add more stuff to it. Okay. Another example that we have. So, previous semesters we also did similar project, but sacred and profane, but it was of watercolor instead of using lines. So again, you can use any inspiration. What we're showing you today is more architectural. This one is more artistic, right? This is of a concept. These are 1 word each. Right, sorry, here, I have a page with a popular. So this is the whole entire concept. This one, I don't have it. So this one is representing the anchor. And you can see like it's so beautifully done. This was a project that we don't do anymore, but it's set up similarly. This is the Matrix project that we use watercolor, and you guys have you will have an opportunity to add an artistic sense onto this. You can see Hasim actually. I don't know. He did watercolor, but it looks like it's pencil, but very light, the blue lines. But we'll see.
Don't get carried away with the water.
Please don't get carried away. She didn't like our classes at all.
I got
Yeah,
way too carried away with the
Yeah.
water.
We all had too much fun with it.
Yeah.
Mine looked like somebody just splattered blood on it.
So I mean, watercolor, it's watercolor. You don't control it so much. Watercolor, just let it do its own thing. It needs to run, it needs to bleed, they need to blend, right? You don't control watercolor as much.
I wish we had Kate's. His Kate's was really nice.
His
The
is
white
very
color,
nice. Yeah. Okay. This is actually for the TAs. That's a portfolio example. Okay, so a few example of concepts, right? And you guys will